The snow was falling when Emma Lawson discovered her father wasn't dead. He was currency. Standing beside a black Mercedes at 3 a.m., she faced Adrian Castillo, a man whose name made Chicago's underworld whisper. He offered her an impossible choice: marry him for 6 months, play the devoted wife in his dangerous world, and her father walks free. Refuse, and she'd never see him again. What began as a desperate bargain in the snow would drag Emma into a realm of power, deception, and deadly loyalty, where the line between captor and protector vanished entirely. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. What? The emergency room doors slammed open for the 9th time that night, bringing another rush of cold Chicago air and another broken body. Emma Lawson didn't flinch anymore. After 5 years of nursing and 7 months working the graveyard shift at Mercy General, she'd learned to compartmentalize the chaos, the screaming, the blood, the desperate prayers of families who couldn't afford to lose anyone else. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, the paramedic barked as they wheeled the gurney past her station. BP's dropping. We're losing him. Emma grabbed her tablet and followed them into Trauma Bay 3, her sneakers squeaking against linoleum that never quite came clean no matter how many times environmental services mopped it. Dr. Chen was already gloved up, shouting orders that Emma translated into action without conscious thought. Insert IV line. Hang 2 units of O negative. Prep the crash cart. The controlled chaos lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, the patient was stable and headed to surgery, and Emma was leaning against the nurse's station trying to remember if she'd eaten anything since yesterday's stale bagel. "You look like death," Maria said, her fellow night shift nurse sliding a cup of vending machine coffee across the counter. "Actually, you look worse than most of the people we admit." Emma managed a tired smile. "Flattery will get you nowhere." "I'm serious, Em. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" "Sleep is for people without student loans and rent due in 3 days." Emma took a sip of the coffee and immediately regretted it. It tasted like burnt despair with a hint of chemical vanilla. "Besides, I picked up Martinez's shift on Thursday. That's an extra $200. Maria's expression softened with the kind of pity Emma had learned to hate. Everyone at Mercy knew her story, or thought they did. Father disappeared 3 years ago, left her with nothing but debts and questions. Mother dead since Emma was 12. No siblings, no safety net, just a mountain of medical school debt she'd inherited when her father vanished, and the financial aid office came calling for their co-signed loans. "You can't keep running yourself into the ground," Maria said quietly. "Watch me." The rest of the shift passed in the usual blur of vital signs, medication rounds, and the particular exhaustion that came from caring deeply about strangers while your own life fell apart in slow motion. By the time 6 a.m. arrived, Emma's feet ached, her scrub smelled like antiseptic and someone else's blood, and she wanted nothing more than to collapse into her tiny studio apartment and sleep until the world made sense again. The snow had started sometime after midnight. Now it fell in thick, heavy flakes that turned Chicago's streets into something almost beautiful, covering the grime and the graffiti with pristine white. Emma pulled her thin coat tighter. The good winter coat had gone to the pawn shop 2 months ago, and started the 6-block walk to the L station. Her breath formed clouds in the frozen air. The streets were nearly empty at this hour, just the occasional early riser and the night people heading home to whatever waited for them. Emma's mind was already drifting toward sleep when she noticed the car. A black Mercedes S-Class, idling at the curb half a block ahead. In this neighborhood, a car like that stood out like a diamond in a dumpster. Emma's first instinct was to cross the street, take the long way around. Nothing good came from luxury vehicles in this part of town at this hour. But then the back door opened. A man stepped out, and even at a distance, Emma could tell he didn't belong to this world of rusted fire escapes and corner stores with bars on the windows. He wore a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to look over his shoulder. He was looking directly at her. Emma's heart kicked into a higher gear. She thought about running, but her exhausted legs wouldn't cooperate. Besides, she told herself, this was Chicago. Weird things happened. Maybe he was just lost, some rich businessman who'd taken a wrong turn after a late night. Emma Lawson? Her name in his mouth stopped her cold. The man's voice was deep, accented with something European that she couldn't quite place. He He stood between her and the station now, blocking the sidewalk with casual authority. "I don't know you," Emma said, proud that her voice came out steady. "And I need to get home." "I know you don't know me, but I know you." He gestured toward the open car door. "And I have information about your father." The world tilted. Emma's father, Thomas Lawson, had vanished 3 years, 4 months, and 17 days ago. She'd marked every single one of them, waiting for news that never came. The police had been useless. No body, no evidence of foul play. Just another deadbeat dad who'd walked away from his responsibilities. But Emma knew better. Her father wouldn't have left her. Something had happened to him. "My father is dead," she heard herself say. The lie she'd learned to tell because it hurt less than the alternative. "No," the man said simply. "He's not." Emma's legs felt suddenly weak. She became aware of the driver watching from behind the wheel, of the empty street, of how completely vulnerable she was. "Who are you?" "Someone who can help you, but not out here in the cold." He stepped aside, gesturing again to the car's interior. "Please, 5 minutes of your time, that's all I'm asking." Every instinct screamed at her to run. But 3 years of not knowing, of wondering, of carrying the weight of unanswered questions, it was too heavy. And the desperate, irrational hope that maybe, somehow, her father was alive. Emma got in the car. The interior was warm, leather seats heated against the Chicago winter. But it was the man already sitting in the back seat that made Emma's breath catch. He was younger than the driver who'd approached her, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that suggested both strength and cruelty, and eyes so dark they were almost black. He was looking at her the way a scientist might examine a particularly interesting specimen. "Ms. Lawson," he said, and his voice was different from his associates, American, with hints of something else buried beneath. "Thank you for joining me. I'm Adrian Castillo." The name hit her like a physical blow. Even Emma, who barely followed the news and certainly didn't track Chicago's criminal underworld, had heard of Adrian Castillo. He was the kind of figure that existed in whispers and speculation. A businessman, they said. Import-export, real estate, legitimate ventures that somehow generated enough wealth to make him untouchable. The truth, which everyone knew but no one could prove, was darker. Adrian Castillo controlled half of Chicago's organized crime. Drugs, weapons, money laundering. If it was illegal and profitable, his fingerprints were on it. The FBI had been trying to build a case against him for years. They always failed. Emma reached for the door handle. "Your father is alive," Adrian said, stopping her. "And I'm the only reason he hasn't been killed." She turned back slowly. "You're lying." "I don't lie. It's inefficient." He reached into his coat and pulled out a phone, tapping the screen before turning it toward her. "This was taken 4 hours ago." The photo showed a man sitting at a simple table in what looked like a comfortable but austere room. He was thinner than Emma remembered, his hair more gray than brown now, but it was unmistakably Thomas Lawson. Her father. Alive. A sound escaped her throat, half sob, half gasp. "Where is he?" she demanded. "What have you done to him?" "I've kept him alive," Adrian said, pocketing the phone. 3 years ago, your father made certain choices that put him in considerable debt to very dangerous people. He came to me seeking protection. I provided it. By holding him prisoner? By keeping him breathing. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested this conversation bored him. The people he betrayed don't forgive, Ms. Lawson. They don't forget. Your father has information they would kill to obtain and kill to suppress. I'm the only thing standing between him and a very painful death. Emma's mind raced. Then let him go. If you're so powerful, just let him go. I could, but why would I? Adrian leaned back, studying her with those unsettling dark eyes. Your father's survival has been useful to me. However, his usefulness is coming to an end. Which brings me to why you're here. The car felt smaller suddenly, the warmth oppressive. I need a wife, Adrian said. Emma blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. Excuse me? A wife, temporarily, 6 months to be precise. He spoke as if discussing a business transaction, which Emma supposed it was. I have certain dealings that require the appearance of stability. A family man is more trustworthy than a bachelor, particularly in the circles I need to navigate. You will marry me, appear devoted and happy in public, and help me establish the image I require. You're insane. I'm practical, and I'm offering you something in return. Adrian's voice remained perfectly level. Agree to this arrangement, and at the end of 6 months, your father goes free. I'll provide him with a new identity, enough money to start over, and my guarantee of protection. I'll also clear your debts, all of them. Student loans, credit cards, medical bills. You'll walk away with a clean slate and your father alive. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. And if I refuse? Then your father stays where he is, and you continue your current trajectory toward bankruptcy and exhaustion. I hear you've picked up extra shifts. How long do you think you can maintain that pace before you collapse? The casual cruelty of it took her breath away. He'd been watching her, studying her, learning the contours of her desperation. This is kidnapping, Emma said. Extortion. This is business, and an opportunity. Adrian tilted his head slightly. You're a nurse, Ms. Lawson. You understand triage. You save who you can, when you can, with the resources available. Right now, I'm offering you the resources to save your father. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price. Emma looked at the window, at the snow still falling on Chicago's empty streets. She thought about her father, alive somewhere, waiting. She thought about the mountain of debt that grew larger every month, the collection calls she ignored, the constant weight of never having enough. She thought about the fact that she was sitting in a car with one of the most dangerous men in Chicago, and the only thing keeping her alive was his apparent need for a temporary wife. Why me? She asked quietly. There must be hundreds of women who would jump at this chance. Models, socialites, people who actually know how to exist in your world. For the first time, something almost like interest flickered across Adrian's face. Because they would want more than I'm offering. They would see this as an opportunity for permanent access to wealth and power. You, Ms. Lawson, want only one thing, your father's freedom. That makes you trustworthy and temporary. You don't know anything about me. I know you work 70-hour weeks to cover debts that aren't even yours. I know you haven't bought new clothes in 8 months. I know you eat one meal a day and tell yourself it's intermittent fasting when really it's poverty. His voice remained clinical, detached. I know you're drowning, and I'm offering you a way to shore. The only question is whether your pride will let you take it. Emma hated him in that moment, hated his accuracy, his cold assessment of her desperation, the way he'd reduced her entire life to a transaction. But she thought about her father's face in that photo, older and grayer, but alive. Alive. If I agree, she said slowly, I want to see him, before the wedding. I need to know he's really okay. Adrian considered this. Acceptable. You'll have one supervised visit before the ceremony. And after 6 months, he goes free? Really free? No strings? No conditions? You have my word. Your word means nothing to me. A ghost of a smile touched Adrian's lips. Then consider it a contract. I honor my contracts, Miss Lawson. It's the foundation of my business. Break your word to me, and there are consequences. But keep it, and I keep mine. The snow fell heavier now, coating the windows. Emma thought about turning him down, walking away, reporting this whole conversation to the police. But the police hadn't found her father in 3 years. They wouldn't help now. She was alone, drowning, exactly as Adrian had said. And he was offering her a lifeline, poisoned though it might be. 6 months, Emma heard herself say, and then we're done. 6 months, Adrian agreed. I want it in writing. A contract, clear terms. My lawyer will have it ready tomorrow. Emma's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, willing them to stop. What happens now? Now you go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow evening, someone will bring you to my residence where you'll be staying for the duration of our arrangement. Bring whatever you need. Everything else will be provided. I have work. My shifts will be covered. You're done at Mercy General as of today. Your replacement has already been arranged. The presumption of it stole her breath. You can't just, I can, and I have. You're going to be very busy learning how to be my wife, Ms. Lawson. You won't have time for nursing. He nodded to his associate in the front seat. Michael will drive you home. The man who'd first approached her, Michael, started the engine. Emma reached for the door handle again, her mind screaming at her to run, to take back her agreement, to escape while she still could. But the image of her father's face held her frozen. Lawson, Adrian said as she pushed the door open. She turned back. This arrangement works only if you commit fully. Half measures will be obvious, and obvious makes this entire endeavor pointless. If you agree to marry me, you agree to sell the performance completely. Can you do that? Emma thought about all the times she'd smiled at difficult patients, stayed calm during codes, pretended everything was fine when her world was falling apart. She'd been acting for years. I can do that, she said. Good. Michael will collect you at 7 tomorrow evening. Be ready. Emma climbed out into the snow. The cold hit her like a slap, clearing some of the fog from her mind. She stood on the sidewalk, watching the Mercedes pull away, its taillights disappearing into the winter morning. What had she just agreed to? She walked the remaining blocks to her apartment in a daze, barely registering the cold or the snow or the early morning commuters starting to fill the streets. Her studio apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had been questionable even before the landlord stopped doing maintenance. She climbed the stairs automatically, her body moving while her mind spun. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, tiny, cramped, filled with the evidence of her failing attempts to stay afloat. Bills stacked on the counter, empty fridge, secondhand furniture that had been old when she'd bought it at Goodwill. Emma sat on her bed and stared at the wall. Her father was alive. She was going to marry Adrian Castillo. 6 months. She just had to survive 6 months. The laugh that escaped her was slightly hysterical. Survive, as if she'd been doing so well at that before. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion won. Emma collapsed onto her bed, still wearing her scrubs, and fell into dreams filled with snow, black cars, and her father's face aging in a photograph. But when she woke, the light filtering through her thin curtains suggested late afternoon. Emma's phone showed 23 missed calls from the hospital and a text from Maria. "Where are you? They said you quit? Call me." Emma stared at the message. How could she possibly explain? She couldn't, so she didn't try. Instead, she started packing. 6 months of her life fit into 2 duffel bags. Pathetic, really, but there it was. Clothes, mostly threadbare. The photo album with pictures of her parents, back when her mother was still alive and her father still smiled. A few books she'd read so many times the spines were cracked. That was it. The sum total of Emma Lawson's existence. At exactly 7 o'clock, someone knocked on her door. Emma expected Michael, but the man waiting in the hallway was different, older, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent time in the military. He wore a dark suit and an earpiece. "Ms. Lawson, I'm James. I'll be driving you to Mr. Castillo's residence. May I take your bags?" It was happening. Really happening. Emma handed over her duffel bags and followed James down to a different luxury vehicle, a black SUV with tinted windows. The drive took them out of her neighborhood, away from the shabby streets and corner stores, toward the part of Chicago she'd only ever seen from a distance. The Gold Coast, where the wealthy lived in penthouses and townhouses that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. They pulled up to a building that was all glass and steel, modern architecture that screamed money. A doorman appeared immediately, greeting James by name, eyeing Emma with polite curiosity. The elevator required a key card to access the top floor. The penthouse. The doors opened directly into the apartment. An apartment was too small a word for it. The space was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the Chicago skyline and Lake Michigan beyond. Everything was clean lines and expensive materials, marble, hardwood, furnishings that probably had Italian names Emma couldn't pronounce. Adrian stood near the windows, holding a glass of what looked like whiskey. He'd changed from this morning's overcoat into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with what looked like old scars. "Ms. Lawson," he said, "welcome to your new home." Emma set her bags down, feeling completely out of place. "It's big. You'll have your own room, your own space. The arrangement is professional, not personal. I have no interest in forcing intimacy." The clinical way he said it should have been reassuring. Instead, it just made Emma feel more like a business transaction. "James will show you to your quarters," Adrian continued. "We'll dine at 8. Tomorrow, my stylist will arrive to begin transforming your wardrobe. You'll also meet with my publicist and attorney. The wedding is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks? Emma's voice came out higher than intended. That's sufficient time to make this believable. The engagement story is already being planted with the media. We met 6 months ago, kept it private, fell deeply in love. You'll need to memorize the details. What details? Adrian set down his glass. Where we met. Our first date. What I said when I proposed. The story has to be consistent, Ms. Lawson. Any contradiction will raise questions we can't afford. Emma felt like she was drowning again, pulled under by details she hadn't considered. Of course there would be a cover story. Of course they couldn't just appear married out of nowhere. Adrian Castillo was public enough that people would notice, ask questions, demand answers. I'll have the documentation sent to your room, Adrian said. Memorize it tonight. Tomorrow, we begin your transformation. Transformation? Emma repeated numbly. You're a nurse from a working-class neighborhood. I need you to be a woman who belongs on my arm at charity galas and business dinners. That requires adjustment. The casual dismissal of who she was stung more than it should have. But Emma swallowed the anger. This was the deal. This was the price. Fine, she said. Transform away. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Amusement, maybe, or surprise. James will show you around. Dinner at 8. Emma's quarters turned out to be a bedroom suite larger than her entire former apartment. King-size bed, walk-in closet, attached bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. Everything was decorated in shades of cream and gray, expensive and impersonal. A folder waited on the bed. Emma opened it to find their fabricated love story, complete with dates, locations, and detailed narratives of a romance that had never happened. First meeting, June 14th, at a charity fundraiser for children's cancer research. Adrian noticed Emma across the room. She was there as a +1 for a colleague. He approached her by the dessert table. They talked for 3 hours. First date, June 21st, dinner at Alinea. Adrian ordered the tasting menu. Emma wore a blue dress. He told her about his mother who died when he was 16. She told him about losing her mother at 12. They connected over shared grief. Emma read through the entire document, each fabricated moment, another lie she'd have to remember. By the time she finished, her head ached. A knock on the door startled her. Miss Lawson, dinner is served. The dining room could have seated 20, but was set for 2 at opposite ends of a long table. Adrian was already seated, reading something on a tablet. Sit, he said without looking up. A woman Emma hadn't seen before brought out the first course, some kind of delicate soup garnished with microgreens. Emma's stomach, which had been tied in knots all day, suddenly reminded her she hadn't eaten since yesterday. They ate in silence for several minutes before Adrian finally spoke. You read the documentation? Yes. Questions? Hundreds, but I'll start with this. Why the charity fundraiser? Why not somewhere more, I don't know, normal? Because normal doesn't fit the narrative. I don't meet women at normal places. I meet them at events that cost $10,000 a plate. He took a sip of wine. You need to understand the world you're entering, Ms. Lawson. Nothing about it is normal. I'm starting to realize that. Adrian set down his fork, studying her with that unnerving intensity. You're angry. I'm terrified. There's a difference. Fear is reasonable, but anger will make you sloppy. Sloppy gets people killed in my world. The casual mention of death made Emma's appetite vanish. Is that a threat? It's a fact. The people will be around. They're watching for weakness, for cracks, for any opportunity to gain advantage. If they sense you're not really committed to this marriage, they'll exploit it, which puts you at risk. And more importantly, puts my plans at risk. Your plans, Emma repeated. You still haven't told me what this is really about. What business dealing requires a wife? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I'm purchasing a significant stake in several legitimate businesses. Banks, investment firms, properties. The people selling want assurance that I'm transitioning away from my previous ventures. A family man suggests stability, permanence, legitimacy. It's image management. Money laundering, you mean? I mean exactly what I said. His voice hardened slightly. You don't need to know the details of my business, Ms. Lawson. You need only to play your part convincingly. They finished dinner in silence. Emma excused herself as soon as it was polite, retreating to her room where she locked the door and tried to process everything. She was living with a criminal, a man who spoke of death casually, who controlled her father's life, who needed her for reasons she didn't fully understand and probably never would. Emma pulled out her phone, intending to call Maria, to call someone, to hear a friendly voice. But what would she say? The truth was impossible, and lies were all she had now. Instead, she opened the folder again and began memorizing their fake love story, each detail another bar in the cage she'd built around herself. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like boot camp than wedding planning. The stylist, a severe woman named Isabel, descended on Emma with the ruthless efficiency of a general planning a military campaign. Out went Emma's entire wardrobe. Donated, Isabel said with barely concealed disdain. In came designer labels Emma had only seen in magazines. Chanel, Prada, Valentino, names that cost more per item than she used to make in a month. Stand straighter, Isabel commanded during one of countless fitting sessions. You carry yourself like someone apologizing for existing. Mrs. Castillo does not apologize. Mrs. Castillo. The name still felt foreign, wrong. The publicist, Marcus, was friendlier but no less demanding. He drilled Emma on their cover story until she could recite it in her sleep, then added layers. Adrian's favorite foods, his pet peeves, the little details that made a relationship real. He hates olives, Marcus told her. Always picks them off salads. You think it's adorable. I think it's stupid, Emma muttered. In public you think it's adorable. Practice your adoring gaze. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine, presented Emma with a contract that ran 43 pages and included clauses Emma was certain couldn't be legal. But she signed it anyway, her signature binding her to 6 months of performance. Adrian himself remained distant, appearing for scheduled dinners where they practiced couple behavior, casual touches, knowing glances, the shorthand of intimacy. It felt mechanical and strange, but Adrian insisted on precision. When I touch your back in public, you lean into it slightly, he instructed during one particularly awkward rehearsal dinner. Not too much, just enough to suggest comfort. This is insane, Emma said, stepping away from his hand. No one is going to believe this, but they will if we sell it properly. Adrian's patience seemed infinite, which somehow made it worse. Again. They practiced until Emma's performance became automatic. The slight lean, the soft smile, the way she was supposed to look at him like he hung the moon when really she wanted to throw her wine in his face. Through it all, Emma waited for her promised visit with her father. But Adrian kept putting it off. Soon, he said. After the wedding, he said. When security allows, he said. Each delay felt like another betrayal, but Emma had no leverage. She was trapped in a gilded cage waiting for the door to open. The wedding itself was scheduled at a private estate outside Chicago. 200 guests, all carefully selected from Adrian's business associates and social circle. Emma knew none of them. Smile, Marcus coached her the day before. You're marrying the love of your life. You should look happy. Emma practiced her smile in the mirror. It looked fake even to her. The night before the wedding, Emma couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, looking out at Chicago's glittering skyline, and wondered what the hell she was doing. A knock on her door made her turn. Adrian stood in the hallway, still dressed despite the late hour. Can't sleep? He asked. Would you? He almost smiled. Fair point. May I come in? Emma hesitated, then stepped aside. Adrian walked to the window, standing beside her to look at the view. Second thoughts? He asked. 1,000 thoughts more like. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. I haven't seen my father. You keep promising, but... Tomorrow, Adrian said. After the ceremony, before the reception, you'll have 30 minutes with him, supervised. It's the best I can offer without compromising security. Emma wanted to argue, to demand more, but she recognized the finality in his tone. Why are you really doing this? And don't give me that line about legitimate business. There has to be more to it. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. My father built his empire through fear and violence. It worked, but it also made enemies that never stopped coming. I want something different, something that lasts beyond the next power struggle. He glanced at her. That requires appearing to be something other than what I am. And what are you? Exactly what you think I am, Miss Lawson. Don't romanticize this arrangement. I'm not a good man pretending to be bad. I'm a bad man pretending to be good. The honesty was almost refreshing. At least you admit it. I don't believe in lying to myself. It's inefficient. He turned from the window. Tomorrow, you become my wife. For 6 months, we play this game. Then you walk away with your father and your freedom. Keep that goal in mind when things get difficult. You mean when I have to pretend to love a criminal? I mean when you realize that the people in my world are far worse than me, and that this arrangement, manipulative as it is, might be the safest place for you right now. With that cryptic statement, he left. Emma returned to staring at the skyline, her reflection ghostly in the window glass. Tomorrow she would marry Adrian Castillo. Tomorrow her old life would end completely. She just hoped she'd survive long enough to reclaim it. The morning of the wedding arrived with unseasonable warmth, winter giving way to one of those strange February days that felt almost like spring. Emma stood in front of the mirror in the estate's bridal suite, barely recognizing herself. The dress was a masterpiece. Isabel had made sure of that. Ivory silk that hugged her body before flowing into a train that seemed to go on forever. Delicate lace along the shoulders and back. Her hair had been styled into soft waves, makeup applied with professional precision to create a version of Emma Lawson that looked like she belonged in Adrian Castillo's world. She looked beautiful. She felt like a fraud. "You're going to wrinkle the dress if you keep twisting your hands like that," Isabel said, appearing behind her with a veil. "Deep breath, darling. You look perfect." Perfect for a performance, Emma thought. Perfect for a lie. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Emma had 90 minutes left of being unmarried, 90 minutes before she legally bound herself to a man she barely knew and definitely didn't trust. Her stomach churned with anxiety that the makeup couldn't hide. A knock on the door made both women turn. Marcus poked his head in, his usually cheerful expression serious. "Emma, you have a visitor. He says it's urgent." Emma's heart jumped. Her father? Had Adrian changed his mind about the timing? But the man who entered wasn't Thomas Lawson. He was younger, mid-40s maybe, with salt and pepper hair and expensive clothes that didn't quite hide the predatory gleam in his eyes. He smiled at Emma, but it was the kind of smile sharks gave before they bit. "Ms. Lawson," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "Or should I say, the future Mrs. Castillo. I'm Marco Vega. I wanted to introduce myself before the ceremony." Isabel's face went pale. Marcus stepped forward quickly. "Mr. Vega, this is highly irregular. The bride is preparing—" "I'll only take a moment." Vega's smile didn't waver, but his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "I wanted to wish you well on your special day. Adrian is a very lucky man." Emma found her voice. "Thank you. That's kind of you." "Is it?" Vega moved closer, studying her the way someone might study a painting, trying to determine if it was genuine or fake. "You know, I've known Adrian for many years. We move in similar circles. And I have to admit I was surprised to hear about this wedding. Adrian has never been the marrying type." "People change," Emma said, channeling every acting skill she'd learned over the past 3 weeks. "Do they?" "In my experience, men like Adrian don't change. They adapt. They strategize. They use whatever tools are available to achieve their goals." Vega's eyes were sharp, assessing. "I wonder what goal requires a wife." The implied threat hung in the air. Emma felt Marcus tense beside her, saw Isabel take a subtle step backward. This man was dangerous. More dangerous than Adrian had prepared her for. "I'm sorry," Emma said, keeping her voice level, "but I need to finish getting ready. The ceremony." Of course, I won't keep you." Vega produced a business card from his pocket, holding it out to her. "But if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, please don't hesitate to call. A woman in your position should have friends in all quarters." Emma took the card automatically, her fingers numb. Vega gave a slight bow and left, but the air felt contaminated by his presence. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed once the door closed. "Does Adrian know he's here?" "He must," Isabel said, already pulling out her phone. "Vega wouldn't dare show up uninvited." Emma stared at the business card. Marco Vega, CEO, Vega International Holdings. Below it, a phone number written in what looked like expensive ink. "Who is he?" Emma asked quietly. Marcus and Isabel exchanged glances. Finally, Marcus spoke. He's one of Adrian's biggest rivals. They've been playing chess with each other for years. Business deals, territory disputes, the kind of competition that sometimes turns violent. If he's here, it means he's watching, looking for weaknesses. And he thinks I'm a weakness. You're an unknown variable, Isabel corrected, taking the card from Emma's hand and tucking it into her clutch. That makes him curious. Don't let him rattle you. Adrian wouldn't have brought you into this if he didn't think you could handle it. But Emma wasn't sure she could handle it. Vega's visit had stripped away the romantic veneer of the wedding, revealing the cold calculation beneath. She wasn't a bride. She was a chess piece. The next hour passed in a haze. Isabel made final adjustments to the dress and veil. A photographer came in to take pre-ceremony portraits, directing Emma to smile, to look happy, to embody joy she didn't feel. Through it all, Emma kept thinking about Vega's words. I wonder what goal requires a wife. At 1:50, Marcus returned. It's time. The estate's great room had been transformed into something out of a magazine spread. White flowers everywhere, roses, peonies, orchids, their scent almost overwhelming. Rows of chairs filled with people Emma didn't know, all dressed in designer clothes and expensive jewelry, all watching with curious eyes as she appeared at the back of the room. The music began. Pachelbel's canon, predictable and safe. Emma forced herself to walk slowly down the aisle, one hand clutching a bouquet of white roses that cost more than her old monthly rent. And there, at the front, stood Adrian. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly, making him look like something out of a Hollywood film. His dark eyes tracked her approach with an intensity that made Emma's skin prickle. For a moment, she saw him as others must, powerful, magnetic, dangerous. A man who commanded rooms just by entering them. Their eyes met, and Emma saw something flicker in his expression. Not love, certainly not that, but perhaps approval? She was playing her part well. That's all that mattered to him. The officiant, a judge Adrian had carefully selected, began the ceremony. Emma barely heard the words. Her mind kept drifting to her father, somewhere in this building, waiting. 30 minutes, Adrian had promised. 30 minutes after she became his wife. Do you, Emma Christine Lawson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The question pulled her back to the moment. Every eye in the room was on her. Adrian's hand was warm in hers, his grip firm. This was it, the point of no return. I do, Emma said, and sealed her fate. Adrian's vows were delivered with perfect sincerity, each word sounding genuine despite the script they'd both memorized. When he slid the ring onto her finger, a diamond so large it felt obscene, his touch was gentle. You may kiss the bride. Adrian's hands framed her face, tilting it up toward his. His lips met hers in a kiss that was clearly for the audience, calculated to look passionate without actually being intimate. But for a moment, Emma felt something unexpected. Not attraction exactly, but a strange connection. They were both performing, both trapped in this elaborate theater. Partners in deception, the guests applauded. The photographer's camera flashed, and Emma Lawson became Emma Castillo, a name that felt like a costume she couldn't take off. The reception was held in the estate's ballroom, another display of wealth that made Emma's head spin. Crystal chandeliers, a live orchestra, champagne flowing like water. Adrian kept her close, his hand always at her back or wrapped around hers, the perfect attentive husband. You're doing well, he murmured during their first dance, leading her across the floor with practiced ease. Vega's watching from the east corner. Don't look. Just smile at me like I've said something charming. Emma smiled, hating how automatic it had become. He visited me before the ceremony, warned me about you. Adrian's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened slightly on her waist. What did he say? That you never do anything without a reason. That I should have friends in all quarters. She let Adrian spin her, her dress flowing around them. He gave me his card, which you won't use. Obviously. Vega is more dangerous than you understand, Emma. He doesn't make social calls. He was testing you, trying to create doubt. It was the first time Adrian had used her first name. Something about hearing it in his voice made this feel more real, less like theater. Did I pass the test? She asked. You're still standing here, aren't you? That's enough for now. The music shifted, transitioning to something slower. After this dance, we'll do the rounds. You'll meet investors, business partners, people who need to believe this is real. Remember the backstory. Remember your role. Mrs. Castillo, devoted and in love. Exactly. The next 2 hours were exhausting. Adrian introduced her to what felt like hundreds of people, each one scrutinizing her with varying degrees of suspicion and interest. Emma smiled until her cheeks hurt, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, played the role with every ounce of skill she possessed. A silver-haired man named Richard Cornwall seemed particularly interested in their love story. "So you met at the Cancer Research Gala?" he asked, sipping champagne. "That's my foundation's event. I don't recall seeing you there, Mrs. Castillo." Emma's heart skipped, but her smile never wavered. "I was there as a guest of a colleague from the hospital. We didn't stay long. I had an early shift the next morning, but long enough for Adrian to sweep me off my feet." She felt Adrian's hand squeeze hers gently. Approval. "How romantic," Cornwall said, though his eyes remained sharp. "And you're a nurse?" "Was a nurse. I've left the hospital to focus on philanthropic work." The lie tasted bitter. "There are many ways to help people. Adrian's shown me that." Cornwall seemed satisfied with this answer, moving on to discuss business with Adrian while Emma stood beside her new husband, smiling and nodding, a decorative piece of the performance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Adrian leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Time for your visit. Come with me." They slipped away from the reception, Adrian leading her through hallways until they reached a small study on the second floor. Two of Adrian's security guards stood outside. Inside, Emma could see a figure sitting in an armchair. Her father. 30 minutes, Adrian said. "The guards stay outside, but the door remains open. Those are the terms." Emma barely heard him. She pushed into the room, and Thomas Lawson rose from his chair, his face crumpling as he saw her. "Emma," he breathed. "Oh, my girl." She crossed the distance in seconds, throwing her arms around him. He felt thinner than she remembered, more fragile but alive. Alive and here, and real. "Dad," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I thought you were dead. I know, baby. I know. I'm so sorry." His voice cracked. "I never wanted you involved in this." They held each other for a long moment before Emma pulled back to look at him. He'd aged more than 3 years should account for. New lines around his eyes, his hair almost completely gray now. But his eyes were the same, filled with the same warmth she remembered. "What happened?" Emma asked. "Adrian said you betrayed someone, that you're in danger. It's complicated." Thomas glanced toward the door where Adrian stood watching. "I made mistakes, Em. Got involved with people I shouldn't have. When I realized what they were really doing, I tried to get out. Adrian, he offered protection in exchange for information." "Information about what?" Thomas hesitated. "People who are worse than him, trust me on that." "Trust you?" Emma's voice rose despite herself. "You disappeared for 3 years. I thought you abandoned me. I thought—" She stopped, fighting tears. "Why didn't you contact me, even just to let me know you were alive?" "Because they were watching you, hoping I'd be stupid enough to reach out. Adrian kept you safe by keeping you ignorant." Thomas took her hands. "I never stopped thinking about you. Every single day I wondered if you were okay, if you'd finished nursing school, if you were happy." "Happy?" Emma laughed bitterly. "I've been drowning in your debt, working myself to exhaustion, wondering if I'd ever know what happened to you. And now I find out you've been alive this whole time, and I had to marry a criminal to see you." "Emma, do you know what I agreed to?" 6 months of pretending to be in love with Adrian Castillo. 6 months of living in his world, surrounded by dangerous people, all for the chance to get you back. She squeezed his hands. "So tell me it's worth it. Tell me that at the end of this, you'll actually be free." Thomas looked at Adrian. "Will she?" "I keep my promises," Adrian said from the doorway. 6 months. Emma fulfills her end, I fulfill mine. Your daughter goes free, and you get a new life far from here. "And if she doesn't fulfill her end," Thomas asked quietly, "then we renegotiate." Adrian's tone made it clear that renegotiation wouldn't be pleasant. Thomas turned back to Emma. "Then make it worth it, baby. Play the part, stay safe, and get out as soon as you can. Don't let this world trap you the way it trapped me." They spent the remaining minutes talking about smaller things. Emma's years in nursing school, Thomas's regrets, the memories they both clung to of better times. But too soon, Adrian was clearing his throat. Time's up. Emma hugged her father one more time, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, trying to memorize the feel of his arms around her. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Em. Be careful. And remember, 6 months. Then you run, and don't look back. Adrian led her back downstairs, his hand firm on her elbow. Emma's emotions churned, relief at seeing her father alive, anger at the years lost, fear of what the next 6 months would bring. You okay? Adrian asked as they neared the ballroom. No, but I'll manage. That's all I ask. He paused before they entered. Your father is wrong about one thing. What's that? This world doesn't trap people. People trap themselves by making choices they can't unmake. Adrian's dark eyes held hers. You made your choice, Emma. Now we both have to live with it. They returned to the reception, slipping back into their roles seamlessly. Emma smiled and danced and played the blissful bride, while inside her mind raced with everything her father had said. The party continued past midnight. Emma's feet ached in her designer heels. Her face hurt from smiling, and she'd lost count of how many glasses of champagne she'd pretended to drink. Finally, Adrian announced they needed to leave. Early flight tomorrow for their honeymoon, he explained to the guests, though Emma knew it was a lie. There was no honeymoon, just a return to the penthouse and the continuation of their arrangement. The drive back was silent. Emma stared out the window at Chicago's late-night streets, so different from the world she'd just left. Adrian worked on his phone, apparently unconcerned with small talk. Back at the penthouse, Emma kicked off her heels the moment they entered, not caring about the expensive shoes. Her feet screamed in relief. The dress needs to be preserved, Adrian said, loosening his tie. Isabel will collect it tomorrow. Fine. And we have a brunch scheduled for 11 with the Hartfords. They're major investors in the Lincoln Park development. Emma spun to face him. I just got married. We just got married. Can't we have one day without performance? No. Adrian's response was immediate. This is what you signed up for, Emma. Every day for 6 months is performance. You knew that going in. I knew it intellectually. Living it is different. Adapt. He headed toward his own room, then paused. You did well today. The wedding, the reception, meeting your father, you held it together. I'm impressed. It wasn't quite a compliment, but it was the closest thing to praise Emma had heard from him. She didn't know how to respond, so she didn't try. In her room, Emma struggled out of the wedding dress, hanging it carefully despite wanting to tear it off. She stood in front of the mirror in just her slip, studying the woman looking back. Mrs. Emma Castillo, a stranger wearing her face. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your marriage. Remember, my offer stands. You have friends if you need them. M.V. Marco Vega. How did he have her number? Emma deleted the message immediately, but the unease lingered. Vega was testing her, probing for weakness. Adrian had warned her, but experiencing it firsthand was different. She was in over her head, surrounded by dangerous people playing games she didn't understand with stakes she couldn't calculate, and she had 6 months to survive it. Emma climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face, aged and worn. She heard Vega's smooth voice offering friendship that was really threat. She felt Adrian's hand on her back, guiding her through the performance. Somewhere around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep and wandered out to the living room. Chicago sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, beautiful and indifferent to the drama playing out in this penthouse. Can't sleep either? Emma turned to find Adrian standing near the kitchen, holding a glass of water. He changed into pajama pants and a t-shirt, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Too much champagne, she lied. You barely drank any, I noticed. Of course he had. Adrian noticed everything. I keep thinking about my father, Emma admitted. 3 years he's been alive. 3 years I thought he was dead or worse. Adrian leaned against the counter. Would it have been easier if you'd known the truth? I don't know. Maybe. At least I wouldn't have grieved someone who wasn't dead. You would have grieved someone you couldn't reach. Same result, different path. He studied her in the dim light. Your father made choices that led him here, Emma. He got involved with Vega's operation, discovered things he shouldn't have, and came to me for protection. Every step was his choice. And me? Marrying you? Was that really my choice? You could have said no, walked away. You didn't. Because you were holding my father hostage. I was keeping your father alive, Adrian corrected, his voice sharp. There's a difference. Vega would have killed him, slowly, painfully, to send a message. Instead, your father has been living comfortably, well-fed, well cared for, waiting. That was my choice. Emma wanted to argue, but she couldn't deny the truth of it. Whatever else Adrian was, he'd kept his word about her father's safety. What did my father discover? She asked. You said he found evidence against Vega. Evidence of what? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Human trafficking. Vega runs legitimate businesses on the surface: shipping, imports, real estate. Underneath, he moves people like cargo. Your father was doing accounting work for one of Vega's shell companies and found discrepancies that didn't add up. When he dug deeper, he discovered the truth. The casual way Adrian said it made Emma's stomach turn. Human trafficking. You're telling me my father stumbled onto a trafficking ring? One of the largest on the East Coast. Vega moves hundreds of people every year, women mostly, from Eastern Europe and Asia. Some for labor, some for... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. And you're using my father's evidence to bring Vega down? I'm using your father's evidence to destroy Vega's empire piece by piece. It's a slow process. Vega is connected, powerful, paranoid. Direct confrontation would start a war that would kill dozens. So instead, I dismantle his operation methodically, cut off his supply lines, eliminate his distribution networks, make him bleed financially until he has no choice but to come to the table. And that's why you need to appear legitimate, Emma said, understanding clicking into place. You're buying businesses, establishing yourself as respectable, so when you make your move against Vega, you have clean hands. Exactly. Emma absorbed this. You're still a criminal. Yes, but I'm a criminal who doesn't trade in human lives. There are degrees of evil, Emma. I exist in the gray area. Vega lives in the darkness. Adrian set down his water glass. Your father understood that distinction. That's why he came to me. And now I'm trapped in the same gray area. For 6 months. Then you walk away into the light. He moved toward his room, then paused. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we meet the Hartfords, and they're not as easily fooled as most. Emma returned to her room but didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about human trafficking and degrees of evil and her father's choices that had led them all here. The next morning came too early. Emma forced herself through the routine: shower, hair, makeup, another designer dress from her new wardrobe. She looked polished and perfect, everything Isabel had trained her to be. The brunch with the Hartfords was at a restaurant so expensive it didn't have prices on the menu. Jonathan and Catherine Hartford were in their 60s, old money that radiated from every careful gesture and cultivated accent. So lovely to finally meet you, dear, Catherine said, air-kissing Emma's cheeks. Adrian has told us so much about you. Emma smiled. All good things, I hope. He said you're a nurse. How wonderfully altruistic. The way Catherine said it made altruism sound like a quaint hobby. Will you continue working now that you're married? I'm transitioning into philanthropic work, Emma recited the script. There are many ways to help people. Adrian's shown me that charitable foundations can have significant impact. How true. Catherine's eyes were sharp behind her friendly smile. You know, I've been involved in charity work for 40 years. It's quite different from nursing, I imagine. Less hands-on. Different challenges, Emma agreed. But the goal is the same, helping those who need it. Jonathan Hartford focused on Adrian. I have to say, your marriage surprised many of us. You've always been so focused on business. Emma changed my priorities, Adrian said smoothly, reaching for her hand across the table. His touch was warm, familiar from all their practice sessions. When you meet the right person, everything else becomes secondary. Emma squeezed his hand, playing her part. He's exaggerating. Adrian still works constantly. I just make sure he takes breaks. They all laughed, the moment passing. But Emma caught Catherine watching her with evaluating eyes, measuring, judging, looking for cracks in the performance. The brunch lasted 2 hours. By the end, Emma's face hurt from smiling, and her head throbbed from keeping track of all the lies. But the Hartfords seemed satisfied, and Adrian appeared pleased as they drove back to the penthouse. "Well done," he said. "Catherine Hartford is notorious for seeing through fakery. The fact that she didn't challenge you means you're convincing." "Lucky me," Emma muttered. The days that followed established a pattern: morning routines, afternoon events, evening dinners with business associates, or social engagements with Chicago's elite. Emma played the devoted wife, learning to read Adrian's subtle signals, adapting to the rhythm of their performance. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the performance started feeling less like acting. She learned that Adrian took his coffee black, that he worked late into the night, that he had nightmares sometimes that made him wake at 3 a.m. She discovered he spoke 4 languages, that he donated anonymously to children's hospitals, that he'd put himself through college after his father died. None of it made him less dangerous, but it made him more human. 2 weeks into their marriage, Emma woke to find Adrian already in the kitchen, making breakfast. It was so domestic and unexpected that she actually stopped in the doorway. "You cook?" she asked. "I cook." Surprised? "A little." He gestured to the omelet he was preparing. "Hungry?" They ate together in companionable silence, the morning sun streaming through the windows. It felt almost normal, almost real. And that's when Emma realized the most dangerous thing about this arrangement. It wasn't the crime or the violence or the constant performance. It was how easy it would be to forget it was all pretend, to start believing in the lie they'd created. She had 4.5 months left. 4.5 months until freedom. Emma just hoped she remembered who she was by the time she got there. The call came at 2 in the morning, 3 weeks into the marriage. Emma woke to the sound of Adrian's voice through the walls, sharp and urgent in a language she didn't recognize. Russian, maybe, or something Eastern European. She lay still, listening to the rhythmic pacing of his footsteps, the clipped commands that needed no translation to convey their intensity. When silence finally returned, Emma checked her phone. 2:17. She should go back to sleep. But something about the tension in Adrian's voice had left her wide awake, adrenaline humming through her veins. She found him in his study, still dressed despite the hour, staring at multiple computer screens displaying what looked like security footage and financial data. He didn't look up when she entered. "Problem?" Emma asked. "Vega made a move on one of my shipping routes, intercepted a container at the port." Adrian's fingers flew across the keyboard. "He's testing boundaries, seeing how I'll respond." Emma moved closer, looking at the screens. One showed a shipping manifest with dozens of entries highlighted in red. Another displayed a map of Chicago with various locations marked. What was in the container? "Nothing illegal, if that's what you're asking. Electronics, mostly. Legal imports with all the proper documentation." He pulled up another screen. "But the delay costs me money and makes me look weak. That's the point." "So what are you going to do?" Adrian finally looked at her, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "Nothing." "Nothing?" "Vega wants me to retaliate, to escalate. It would give him justification for more aggressive moves." He leaned back in his chair. "Instead, I'll absorb the loss and continue with the plan. Patience wins more battles than aggression." Emma sat on the edge of his desk, studying him. In the dim light of the monitors, Adrian looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. "How long have you been fighting him?" 5 years, since I took over my father's operations and started changing how we do business." He rubbed his eyes. "Vega represents the old way. Violence, intimidation, treating people as disposable. He sees my approach as weakness." "Is it?" "We'll find out." Adrian stood, moving to the window. Chicago sprawled below them, lights glittering in the darkness. "Your father's evidence is solid, but it takes time to build a legal case that will actually stick. Vega has judges, lawyers, politicians in his pocket. One misstep, and the whole thing falls apart. And me? Where do I fit in this war?" Adrian turned to face her. "You make me appear stable, trustworthy, legitimate. The investors I need to close the Lincoln Park deal, the bankers who control the financing, they want to believe I'm moving away from my father's legacy. A wife suggests commitment, permanence. It makes them comfortable. So I'm a prop in your Reformation story. You're a strategic asset. There's a difference. He moved closer, and Emma was suddenly aware of how thin her pajamas were, how alone they were at this hour. But you're also more effective than I anticipated. People like you, Emma, they trust you in a way they'd never trust me. Because I'm not a criminal? Because you're genuine. Even when you're lying about our relationship, there's a core authenticity to you that people respond to. His gaze held hers. It's valuable. Don't lose it. The moment stretched between them, loaded with something Emma couldn't quite name. Then Adrian stepped back, breaking the tension. Go back to bed. We have the museum gala tomorrow night. You'll need rest. Emma left the study, her mind churning. Back in her room, she lay awake thinking about strategic assets and authenticity and the strange intimacy of 2 a.m. conversations with a man who was supposed to be nothing more than a temporary arrangement. The museum gala was exactly the kind of event Emma had learned to navigate over the past month. Wealthy donors in designer clothes, champagne flowing freely. Conversations that were really negotiations disguised as small talk. She wore a deep green dress that Isabel had selected, her hair swept up to show off the diamond earrings Adrian had given her that morning. They belong to my mother, he'd said, fastening them carefully. Wear them tonight. People will notice. Now standing in the museum's main gallery surrounded by priceless art and Chicago's elite, Emma touched the earrings unconsciously. They felt heavy, weighted with significance she didn't fully understand. Mrs. Castillo, how wonderful to see you. Catherine Hartford appeared at Emma's elbow, resplendent in black silk. Adrian mentioned you're interested in supporting the children's wing renovation. Very interested, Emma said, falling into the script. I spent years working with pediatric patients. I know how important a healing environment can be. How thoughtful. You know, we're forming a committee to oversee the project. I'd love to have you join us. Catherine's smile was warm, but her eyes remained calculating. It would be such a valuable contribution. Emma recognized the test. Saying yes meant deeper involvement in this world, more entanglement with people like Catherine who would watch her every move. Saying no would raise questions about her commitment. I'd be honored, Emma said. Adrian appeared beside her, his hand settling on her lower back with practiced ease. Catherine, you're stealing my wife already? Just recruiting her talents. Emma has such wonderful ideas about the children's wing. Catherine touched Adrian's arm. You found a gem, Adrian. Don't let her get away. I don't intend to, Adrian said, and something in his voice made Emma glance at him. He was looking at her with an expression that seemed almost genuine, pride maybe, or satisfaction. For the cameras, she told herself, always for the cameras. They circulated through the gala, Adrian introducing Emma to an endless stream of important people. She smiled and chatted and played her role flawlessly, but part of her mind kept returning to the early morning conversation, to the weariness in Adrian's eyes when he talked about his war with Vega. You're distracted, Adrian murmured as they moved toward the sculpture gallery. What's wrong? Nothing, just tired. Liar. He guided her into a quieter alcove away from the crowd. What is it? Emma hesitated, then decided honesty might be worth trying. This morning, you looked exhausted, and tonight, you're performing just like I am. I was wondering if you ever get tired of it, the constant performance. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Every single day. The admission surprised her. Then why do it? Because the alternative is worse. My father built an empire on fear and violence. It worked until it didn't. He was killed by rivals when I was 23. I inherited his kingdom and all the enemies that came with it. He leaned against the wall, looking more relaxed than he ever did in public. I could have continued his methods, ruling through intimidation, but I watched that approach destroy him. So I chose a different path. Legitimacy. Evolution. I'm not trying to become a saint, Emma, but I can redirect resources, change how we operate, minimize harm where possible. It's slow, frustrating work, but it's better than the alternative. Emma absorbed this. And Vega? Vega represents everything I'm trying to move away from. He won't change, won't evolve. So he has to be removed, carefully and completely. Adrian's jaw tightened. Your father's evidence is the key. It proves Vega's trafficking operation in ways that even his corrupt judges can't ignore. But I need time to position all the pieces correctly. How much time? 3 months? Maybe 4. He looked at her. Our arrangement ends in 4.5 months. The timing is deliberate. Emma understood. You need me to maintain appearances until you can take Vega down. I need you to help me convince the world I'm someone worth trusting until I can eliminate the biggest threat to that transformation. Adrian's expression softened slightly. I know it's not what you signed up for, but you're handling it remarkably well. Before Emma could respond, Marcus appeared, looking stressed. Adrian, we have a situation. Vega just arrived. Every muscle in Adrian's body tensed. He wasn't on the guest list. He bought a last-minute ticket, donated $50,000 to the museum. Marcus glanced at Emma. He's asking to meet your wife. Adrian's hand found Emma's, his grip firm. Then let's not keep him waiting. They found Marco Vega near the Impressionist Gallery, holding a glass of wine and examining a Monet, with apparent interest. He looked up as they approached, his smile sharp and knowing. Adrian, what a pleasant surprise. And Mrs. Castillo, radiant as ever. Vega's eyes traveled over Emma in a way that made her skin crawl. I was just admiring this piece. Monet's Water Lilies series, so peaceful, so serene. A man could forget there's ugliness in the world looking at something like this. Mr. Vega, Emma said, keeping her voice level, I didn't expect to see you here. I have many interests beyond business, art, culture, beauty in all its forms. He moved closer, and Emma felt Adrian's hand tighten on hers. Tell me, Mrs. Castillo, are you enjoying married life? Adrian can be quite intense. I hope he's not overwhelming you. I find intensity refreshing, Emma said. It's better than superficiality. Vega's smile widened. Clever. Adrian, you've chosen well. Beauty and brains, a dangerous combination. Is there something you need, Marco? Adrian's voice was flat, controlled. Or are you just here to appreciate the art? Can't a man do both? Appreciate beauty while conducting business? Vega's attention shifted back to Adrian. I wanted to discuss your recent shipping difficulties. Such unfortunate delays at the port. I have connections there. Perhaps I could help resolve the situation. For a price, I'm sure. For mutual understanding. We've been at odds for too long, Adrian. Perhaps it's time we found common ground. Emma watched Adrian's face, seeing the calculation behind his neutral expression. This was the game they'd discussed, Vega probing, testing, looking for weakness or opportunity. I appreciate the offer, Adrian said carefully, but I prefer to handle my own difficulties. Pride is expensive. Ask your wife's father about that. Vega's words landed like a physical blow. Emma felt Adrian go rigid beside her. Oh, you didn't think I knew? Thomas Lawson, excellent accountant, terrible at keeping secrets. He discovered some interesting things about my operations, didn't he? Emma's heart hammered. Vega knew. He'd always known. I don't know what you're talking about, Adrian said, but Vega just laughed. Please, we both know exactly what I'm talking about. Thomas found records he shouldn't have seen, evidence he couldn't ignore, and he ran straight to you for protection. Vega leaned in, his voice dropping. But here's what's interesting. You haven't used that evidence. You've been sitting on it for 3 years. Why? Maybe there's nothing to use. Or maybe you're waiting for the right moment, building your case, establishing legitimacy, positioning yourself as the white knight while I play the villain. Vega's eyes gleamed. It's a good strategy, Adrian. Very patient. Very you. But patience has limits. He turned to Emma, his smile returning. Your father is well, by the way, in case you were wondering. Adrian keeps him comfortable, I'm sure. A gilded cage is still a cage, though. Something to remember. Are you threatening my wife? Adrian's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm stating facts. Emma deserves to know the whole truth about the arrangement she's entered. That her marriage is just one piece of a much larger game. That her father's freedom depends on your success against me. That if you fail, Vega shrugged. Well, consequences follow failure. This conversation is over. Adrian moved to guide Emma away, but Vega caught her wrist. One more thing, Mrs. Castillo. That card I gave you at the wedding, keep it. You might need a friend when this all falls apart. Adrian's hand shot out, gripping Vega's wrist and forcing him to release Emma. For a moment, the two men faced each other, violence crackling in the air between them. Touch my wife again, Adrian said softly, and patient strategy becomes the least of your concerns. Vega pulled back, rubbing his wrist but still smiling. Noted. Enjoy the rest of the gala. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Emma realized she was shaking. Adrian noticed, his expression shifting from anger to concern. "Come on," he said, leading her toward a side exit. "We're leaving." They bypassed the main entrance, Adrian's security team materializing to escort them to the car. The drive back to the penthouse was tense and silent. Emma stared out the window, processing Vega's words. He knew everything. The evidence, her father, the real reason for their marriage. And he'd confronted them publicly, stripping away any pretense. Back at the penthouse, Adrian poured himself a drink, something he rarely did. Emma stood by the windows, her mind racing. "He's going to kill my father," she said quietly. "Isn't he?" That's what this was about, a threat. He's posturing, trying to scare you into making mistakes. Adrian downed half his drink. Vega operates on fear and intimidation. Don't give him that power. But he knows, Adrian. He knows about the evidence, about our arrangement, everything. He suspects. There's a difference. Adrian set down his glass. Yes, he knows your father worked for him and discovered the trafficking operation. But he doesn't know how much evidence we actually have, or how close we are to using it. If he did, he'd have made a more aggressive move. Emma turned to face him. What kind of aggressive move? Adrian was quiet for a moment. The kind that makes examples of people. The kind that sends messages written in blood. The blunt words hit Emma like ice water. This wasn't theater or performance or strategic positioning. This was real danger, real violence waiting to erupt. I want to see my father, Emma said. Tomorrow. I need to know he's actually safe. Emma, you promised me access. I've played your devoted wife, attended your galas, smiled at your business partners. I'm asking for what you promised. Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. Let me see my father. Adrian studied her, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow afternoon. But understand, after tonight, security gets tighter. Vega's making moves. That changes things. The next afternoon, Adrian drove Emma himself to see her father. No security detail, no elaborate convoy. Just the two of them in one of his less conspicuous cars, heading to a location he'd kept secret even from Emma. The safe house was in a quiet suburb 40 minutes outside Chicago, an ordinary-looking ranch home that could have belonged to anyone. Inside, Thomas Lawson was reading a newspaper at the kitchen table, looking healthier than Emma had seen him at the wedding. Emma! He stood, embracing her tightly. I didn't expect another visit so soon. Vega confronted us last night, Emma said without preamble. He knows about the evidence. He threatened you. Thomas's expression darkened. He looked at Adrian, who'd remained in the doorway. How bad? He's escalating, making his presence known, testing boundaries. Adrian moved into the room. I'm accelerating the timeline. We move on his trafficking operation in 6 weeks instead of 3 months. That's risky. You said you needed more time to... I did, but Vega's forcing my hand. If I wait too long, he'll make a preemptive strike. Adrian's jaw was tight. 6 weeks to finalize the legal case, coordinate with federal prosecutors, and position assets. Then we take him down completely. Emma looked between them. And my father? Where does he go when this happens? Witness protection, most likely. New identity, new location, federal oversight. Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact. It's the safest option. I'll never see him again, Emma said quietly. The reality of it settled over her like a shroud. Even if everything went perfectly, even if Adrian succeeded in taking down Vega, her father would disappear into witness protection. She'd lose him all over again, this time permanently. Baby, Thomas started, reaching for her hand. No, it's fine. I understand. I knew this was temporary anyway. 6 months, you get a new life, I get my freedom. That was the deal. Emma's voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady. I just didn't think about what freedom would actually cost. Adrian watched this exchange silently. Finally, he spoke. I'll give you two some privacy. I'll be outside. After he left, Thomas pulled Emma into a chair beside him. I'm sorry for all of this, for the choices that led us here. Tell me about it, Emma said. Tell me how you ended up working for Vega, how you found the evidence. I need to understand. Thomas sighed, looking older than his years. I was desperate. After your mother died, I fell apart, started gambling, trying to fill the void. Racked up debts I couldn't pay. Vega's people offered me work, accounting for his import business. The pay was good, and I didn't ask questions I should have asked. When did you realize what he really did? About a year in. I was reconciling shipping manifests and noticed discrepancies. Containers that showed as empty on official documents but had weight charges. Routes that didn't make commercial sense. I started digging, carefully, and found the truth. Thomas's hands shook slightly. Young women, mostly, brought into the country illegally, then forced into labor or worse. The numbers were staggering, hundreds per year through just the routes I could track. Emma felt sick. And you went to Adrian? I tried going to the FBI first, but Vega had people there, feeding him information. Within a week of my meeting with them, 2 of his men showed up at my apartment. Thomas's voice dropped. They made it clear what would happen if I talked. They mentioned you by name, Emma, said they knew where you worked, what time you got off shift. So you disappeared. I panicked, grabbed the evidence I'd compiled, and ran. I'd heard Adrian was Vega's biggest rival, that he ran his operations differently. I thought maybe he'd help. Thomas looked toward the door where Adrian had exited. He did. Gave me protection, kept me safe, but the price was steep. Me. He never asked for you specifically. That came later when he realized he needed to appear legitimate for his business deals. When he found out I had a daughter, he saw an opportunity. Thomas squeezed her hand. I should have said no, should have refused, but I was so afraid of what Vega would do to you if he found out you were my daughter. Emma absorbed this. Does Vega know about me being your daughter? He didn't before, but after last night, if he didn't know, he does now. Thomas's expression was grim. Adrian marrying you painted a target on your back. Vega will use you to get to both of us. As if summoned by their discussion, Adrian appeared in the doorway. We need to leave. I just got word that 2 of Vega's men were spotted 3 blocks from here. Emma's blood went cold. How did they find this location? They didn't, but they're canvassing the area, checking safe houses. Adrian was already moving toward Thomas. Pack essentials. We're moving you tonight. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Thomas threw clothes and documents into a bag while Adrian made rapid-fire phone calls in multiple languages. Emma stood by the window, watching the quiet suburban street for any sign of danger. A black sedan cruised past slowly, and Emma's heart jumped. Adrian! He was beside her in seconds, phone still pressed to his ear. He watched the sedan continue down the street, then barked orders into the phone. We're leaving now. Have the secondary location ready in 20 minutes. They loaded into Adrian's car, Thomas in the back seat with a weapon Emma was shocked to see him handle competently. Adrian drove fast but controlled, taking turns that seemed random until Emma realized he was checking for tails. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere Vega won't think to look. Adrian's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror constantly. One of my legitimate properties. Hiding your father among criminals makes him easy to find. Hiding him in plain sight is smarter. They ended up at a luxury apartment building in downtown Chicago, the kind of place wealthy young professionals lived. Adrian led them to a furnished unit on the 15th floor. This is owned by one of my front companies, he explained. On paper, it's rented to a business consultant from New York. Your father becomes that consultant, complete with documentation and backstory. Thomas looked around the modern apartment, so different from the suburban safe house. I'll be hiding in the middle of the city? No one will look for you here. Vega assumes I'd keep you somewhere remote, heavily guarded. This is the opposite. Minimal security, public building, normal life. Adrian handed Thomas a new phone. Emergency number is programmed in. Use it only if you're in immediate danger. Otherwise, no contact. What about Emma? Thomas asked. If Vega knows she's my daughter, I'll handle Emma's security. She stays close to me, always. My protection extends to her completely. Adrian's voice was firm. Vega won't touch her while she's my wife. It would cross a line even he won't risk. Emma wanted to believe that, but Vega's smile at the gala haunted her. He was a man who enjoyed crossing lines. They left Thomas in his new hiding place, and Adrian drove Emma back to the penthouse in silence. The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed incongruous with the danger swirling around them. "I'm sorry," Adrian said finally. "I didn't anticipate Vega moving this quickly." "You couldn't have known." "I should have. He's desperate, which makes him unpredictable." Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The next 6 weeks are going to be dangerous. I need you to be careful, Emma. No going anywhere alone, no deviating from planned schedules. And if anyone approaches you claiming to represent Vega, you call me immediately." "I'm not stupid. I know, but Vega is creative. He'll try to exploit any opening." Adrian glanced at her. "Your father was right about one thing. Marrying you did paint a target on your back. I should have considered that more carefully before proposing this arrangement." Emma heard something in his voice she'd never heard before. Regret, maybe, or concern that went beyond strategic calculation. "You're protecting me," she said. "That's more than most people have done." They reached the penthouse as full darkness fell. Adrian's security team had been doubled, men in dark suits positioned at every entrance. Inside, Adrian checked the security systems personally, something Emma had never seen him do. "How bad is this?" she asked, watching him work. "Bad enough that I'm sleeping with a gun under my pillow." He finished with the security panel and turned to face her. "I meant what I said, Emma. I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes." The intensity in his eyes made Emma's breath catch. This wasn't performance. This was real concern, real determination. When had that shift happened? When had she stopped being just a strategic asset to him? "I believe you," she said softly. That night, Emma lay awake listening to the city sounds beyond her windows. Somewhere out there, Vega was planning his next move. Somewhere closer, her father was alone in a strange apartment, hiding in plain sight. And down the hall, Adrian was doing whatever Adrian did in the early morning hours when the weight of his empire kept him from sleeping. 4.5 months left. Emma had thought 6 months would crawl by, each day dragging toward freedom. Instead, time was accelerating, rushing her toward a confrontation she wasn't ready for, and an ending that no longer looked as simple as walking away. Because somewhere along the way, between the performances and the late-night conversations, and the moments of genuine connection, Emma had stopped counting days until escape. She'd started counting days until she'd lose everything she was beginning to understand she actually wanted. The phone call shattered the fragile peace Emma had managed to construct over the following 3 weeks. She was reviewing committee notes for the museum's children's wing renovation when Adrian's phone rang. The specific ringtone she'd learned meant emergency. His face went rigid as he listened, and Emma knew instantly that whatever news he was receiving would change everything. "When?" Adrian asked, his voice clipped. A pause. "How many?" Another pause, longer this time. "Lock down all locations. No one moves without clearance. I'm coming now." He ended the call and looked at Emma with an expression that made her stomach drop. "What happened?" she asked. "One of my warehouses was hit 20 minutes ago. 4 of my men dead, 2 more in critical condition. The security footage shows Vega's people." Adrian was already moving toward his study, Emma following close behind. This isn't probing anymore. This is war. Emma watched as Adrian pulled up multiple screens showing various locations around Chicago. Warehouses, offices, properties she didn't recognize. He was on his phone again immediately, issuing orders in that same controlled voice that somehow conveyed absolute authority. "Michael, I want every property secured within the hour. James, pull the emergency funds from the secondary accounts. Catherine," he meant his lawyer, not Hartford, "get the federal prosecutors on standby. We're accelerating everything." "What about my father?" Emma asked when he paused between calls. "He stays where he is for now. That location is still secure." Adrian pulled up another screen showing the downtown apartment building. "But we need to move quickly. Vega's attack on the warehouse means he's desperate. Desperate men take risks." "Like what?" Adrian's eyes met hers, and she saw something that looked almost like fear. "Like going after the people I care about to draw me out." The words hung in the air between them. People I care about. Emma wasn't sure if he meant her specifically or was speaking generally, but something in his expression suggested the former. "I want you to stay in the penthouse," Adrian continued. "Security is being tripled. You don't leave for any reason without my personal approval." "Adrian, I have the museum committee meeting tomorrow, And the charity luncheon on Thursday? Cancelled. All of it. His tone left no room for argument. I'm not risking you to maintain appearances. Not anymore. Emma wanted to argue, to insist she could handle herself, but the memory of Vega's smile and the casual way Adrian had just mentioned 4 dead men made the words die in her throat. This wasn't the controlled performance they'd been maintaining. This was real violence, real death, real danger. The next 48 hours were the longest of Emma's life. She stayed in the penthouse while Adrian coordinated responses to Vega's attack, watching news reports that mentioned a warehouse fire with suspected casualties but no details. The official story was a gas leak. The reality was murder. Adrian barely slept, spending his nights on phone calls and video conferences with people whose names Emma didn't recognize. She brought him coffee at 3 a.m., food he barely touched, the small acts of care feeling inadequate against the weight of what he was carrying. You should rest, she said on the second night, finding him still in his study staring at security footage. I'll rest when Vega is finished. You'll collapse before then. Emma set down the coffee she'd brought. Even you have limits. Adrian looked at her, exhaustion evident in the shadows under his eyes. 4 men died because I didn't anticipate Vega's move. I can't afford to miss the next one. 4 men died because Vega killed them. That's not on you. Isn't it? I started this war. I chose to go after his trafficking operation, to use your father's evidence, to position myself as the alternative to his brutality. Adrian's voice was raw in a way she'd never heard. Those men worked for me because they believed I could protect them. I failed. Emma moved around the desk, surprising herself by placing a hand on his shoulder. You can't protect everyone from everything. That's not how the world works. Then what good is all this power if I can't even keep my own people safe? He gestured at the screens, the empire he'd built. What's the point of any of it? The point is changing what you can change, creating something better than what came before. Emma found herself echoing his own words back to him. You told me you were trying to evolve, to move away from your father's methods. That doesn't mean you can prevent all violence. It means you respond differently. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then his hand came up to cover hers on his shoulder, the touch gentle and unexpected. When did you stop hating me? The question caught Emma off guard. She thought about the past months, the forced proximity, the performances that had become less forced over time, the late-night conversations that had revealed a man more complex than she'd wanted to acknowledge. I'm not sure I ever really hated you, she admitted. I hated the situation. I hated feeling trapped. But you... She paused, searching for honesty. You've been exactly what you promised to be. Direct, honest about what this arrangement is, protective of my father and of me. That's more than most people offer. Adrian turned in his chair to face her, their hands still connected. I brought you into a war zone, Emma. That's not protection. You brought me into your life, and your life happens to be complicated. There's a difference. She squeezed his hand. Besides, I made the choice to agree to this arrangement. You gave me an option. I took it. An option where you had no real choice. I always had a choice. I could have walked away, reported you to the police, refused to cooperate. Emma surprised herself with the conviction in her voice. I chose to trust that you'd keep your word, and so far you have. Something shifted in Adrian's expression, the exhaustion giving way to something more vulnerable. I don't know how to keep you safe and finish this. Vega's attack proved he's willing to escalate. If he thinks hurting you will draw me out or distract me from taking him down, then you need to trust that I'm stronger than I look. Emma pulled her hand back, immediately missing the warmth. I'm not some delicate flower that shatters at the first sign of danger. I've survived worse than Marco Vega. Have you? I survived losing both parents, drowning in debt, working myself to exhaustion for years. I survived believing my father was dead for 3 years. Emma's voice strengthened. Vega doesn't scare me as much as you think. What scares me is the idea of you getting yourself killed trying to protect me when I'm perfectly capable of protecting myself. A ghost of a smile touched Adrian's lips. You're going to protect yourself from a man who runs a trafficking empire and has dozens of killers at his disposal? If I have to. Emma crossed her arms. Look, I know I'm not trained for this world. I don't know how to fight or shoot or do whatever it is your security people do. But I'm not helpless, and treating me like I am just makes this harder. Adrian stood, moving close enough that Emma had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You want to help? Yes. Then learn the security systems. Every panic button, every exit route, every protocol. If something happens, I need to know you can get yourself to safety without me. His hand came up to cup her face, the gesture startlingly intimate. Can you do that? Emma's heart hammered at his nearness, at the intensity in his dark eyes. I can do that. Good. Because I'm about to do something that will make Vega very angry, and I need you ready for the fallout. The next morning, federal agents raided 3 of Vega's shipping facilities simultaneously. The news broke at noon. Major trafficking ring disrupted, dozens arrested, evidence of international human smuggling operation. Adrian's name was mentioned only as a concerned citizen who had provided tips to authorities. Emma watched the coverage from the penthouse, her stomach in knots. This was it. The move Adrian had been planning for years, executed with surgical precision. Vega's empire was crumbling in real time. He'll retaliate, Emma said when Adrian returned that afternoon, looking grimmer than she'd expected for someone who'd just won a major victory. He already is. I've had 3 credible death threats in the last hour, all traced back to his people. Adrian poured himself a drink. The federal case is strong. They'll arrest Vega within 48 hours. But that window is when he's most dangerous. Because he has nothing left to lose. Exactly. Adrian downed his drink. I've moved your father to a federal safe house. Witness protection is processing his paperwork now. He'll be relocated within the week. Emma's breath caught. A week? That's so fast. It has to be. Once Vega is arrested, the people still loyal to him will be looking for revenge. Your father is the star witness. He can't stay in Chicago. Adrian's expression softened slightly. I've arranged for you to see him tomorrow. Final visit before he enters protection. The reality hit Emma like a physical blow. She'd known this was coming, had understood the arrangement from the beginning. But knowing and experiencing were different things. Tomorrow she'd say goodbye to her father, possibly forever. Thank you, she managed. That night Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about her father and the goodbye that was coming, and the strange ache in her chest that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with the man down the hall who was fighting a war on multiple fronts while trying to keep her safe. At some point after midnight, she gave up on sleep and wandered out to the living room. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the windows, beautiful and indifferent. Emma was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Adrian approach until he spoke. Couldn't sleep either. She turned to find him in pajama pants and a t-shirt, looking more approachable than he ever did in his tailored suits. Too much in my head. Your father? Among other things. Emma moved to the windows, pressing her palm against the cool glass. This time tomorrow, I'll have said goodbye. And then what? I just go back to pretending to be your wife while he disappears into witness protection? Adrian joined her at the window. The arrangement was 6 months. We're at 4. You have 2 months left, then you're free to walk away. And if I don't want to walk away? The words escaped before Emma could stop them. She felt Adrian go still beside her, felt the weight of what she'd just implied settling between them. What are you saying? Adrian asked carefully. Emma turned to face him, gathering courage. I'm saying that somewhere in the middle of all this performance and strategy and danger, things changed. I changed. The way I see you changed. And I don't know if that's real or if it's just Stockholm Syndrome or if I'm confusing gratitude with something else. But I know that the idea of walking away in 2 months doesn't feel like freedom anymore. It feels like loss. Adrian's expression was unreadable. Emma, I'm not asking for declarations of love or for you to change the arrangement, Emma continued quickly. I just need you to know that this stopped being purely transactional for me a while ago. And I think maybe it stopped being purely transactional for you too, but you're too controlled to admit it. The silence stretched between them, loaded with everything they'd both been avoiding. Then Adrian moved, his hand coming up to cup her face exactly as he had in his study, except this time there was no pretense of strategy. You're right, he said quietly. This stopped being just an arrangement for me weeks ago, maybe longer. I've been trying to ignore it because caring about you complicates everything, makes me vulnerable in ways I can't afford. But ignoring it doesn't make it less true. Emma's heart was racing. So what do we do? I don't know. I've never been good at anything that isn't strategy or business or carefully calculated risk. Adrian's thumb traced her cheekbone. But I know that keeping you safe has become more important to me than any deal or empire. And that should terrify me, but mostly it just makes me want to keep you closer. Emma made the decision without thinking, rising on her toes to close the distance between them. The kiss was nothing like their staged wedding kiss or the brief touches they'd shared for cameras. This was real, desperate, months of tension finally finding release. Adrian responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her against him. Emma's hands fisted in his t-shirt, anchoring herself as the kiss deepened. It felt like falling and flying simultaneously, terrifying and exhilarating. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst, Emma agreed. I'm still a criminal, still dangerous, still exactly wrong for someone like you. And I'm still stubborn enough not to care. Emma pulled back to look at him. I'm not asking for perfect, Adrian. I'm just asking for real. He studied her face like he was memorizing it. Real is messy. Real means I can't always protect you the way I want to. Real means accepting that my world is violent and complicated and will never be completely safe. I know. Do you? Because once Vega is arrested, there will be others. There will always be someone trying to take what I've built, someone willing to hurt the people I care about, to weaken me. Adrian's voice was intense. Choosing to stay in this life, choosing me, means accepting that danger as permanent. Emma thought about her quiet existence before Adrian, the small apartment and endless shifts and drowning in debt. Safe, maybe, but also suffocating. The past 4 months had been terrifying, but also alive in ways she'd never experienced. I'm not choosing your world, she said carefully. I'm choosing you. There's a difference. Adrian kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. When he pulled back, he took her hand. Come on. If we're doing this, if we're making this real, I need to show you something. He led her to his study, unlocking a drawer she'd never seen him open. Inside was a thick folder, which he handed to her. What is this? Emma asked. Everything about our arrangement, the original contract, the financials, the timeline. Adrian watched as she opened it. And this. He pulled out a separate document dated 3 weeks after their wedding. Emma scanned it, her eyes widening as she understood what she was reading. This is an amendment, she said slowly, removing the 6-month limit, making the marriage permanent, with an option for me to dissolve it at any time with full financial settlement. I had it drawn up after the Hartford brunch, when I realized you were more than just convincing. You were changing how people saw me, how I saw myself. Adrian's expression was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I didn't know if I'd ever show it to you, but if we're being real, you should know that I started thinking about forever a lot sooner than tonight. Emma stared at the document, at the evidence that Adrian had been feeling the same shift she had, maybe even before she'd recognized it herself. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to pressure you. The arrangement was clear, 6 months and freedom. Changing the terms would have been manipulation. He took the document back, setting it on the desk. But now you know. The option exists if you want it. Emma's mind reeled. Permanent marriage to Adrian Castillo meant permanent entanglement in his world, permanent danger, permanent complexity. But it also meant partnership with someone who saw her clearly, challenged her, protected her, trusted her enough to be vulnerable. I can't answer that tonight, she said honestly. There's too much happening, too much at stake, but I want you to know I'm considering it. That's all I ask. Adrian pulled her close, and Emma relaxed into his embrace, feeling safer than she had in weeks, despite the danger swirling around them. They stayed like that for a while, just holding each other in the quiet of the study. Finally, Adrian spoke again. Tomorrow you see your father. Say whatever you need to say. Take all the time you need. His voice was gentle. And then we finish this. We put Vega away, secure your father's safety, and figure out what comes next for us. Emma nodded against his chest. Together? Together. The next afternoon, Adrian drove Emma to an unmarked building on the outskirts of Chicago where federal agents had established a temporary safe house. Thomas Lawson looked smaller somehow in the sterile federal facility, his belongings already packed into 2 modest suitcases. Emma, he said, embracing her tightly, I wasn't sure I'd see you again before. I know. Adrian arranged it. Emma pulled back to look at her father. How are you holding up? Scared, relieved, guilty. Thomas managed a weak smile. The usual when your testimony is putting away one of the most dangerous men in the Midwest. They sat together in a small meeting room while Adrian waited outside, giving them privacy. Emma held her father's hand, trying to memorize every detail. The liver spot on his wrist, the way his wedding ring still caught the light, even though her mother had been gone for years, the familiar warmth of his smile. The agents say I'll be relocated to the Southwest, Thomas said. New name, new background, new life. They're very thorough. Will you be able to contact me? Ever? Thomas hesitated. Maybe. In a year or two, once the trial is completely finished and the appeals are exhausted. But it won't be safe for a long time, baby. Vega has people everywhere. Emma fought back tears. I understand. Do you? Thomas squeezed her hand. Because I need to know you're going to be okay. That you're not staying with Adrian just because of our arrangement. I'm not. Or at least that's not the only reason anymore. Emma took a shaky breath. Things have changed between us. I've changed. I know it's complicated and dangerous and probably crazy, but I think I want to stay. Thomas studied her face for a long moment. Do you love him? The question hung in the air. Emma thought about Adrian's vulnerability in the early morning hours, the way he'd trusted her with his fears, the kiss that had felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff simultaneously. I think I'm falling in love with him, she admitted, which is insane considering how this started, but there it is. Does he love you? I don't know if Adrian knows how to love someone, but he cares about me, protects me, trusts me with parts of himself he doesn't show anyone else. Emma met her father's eyes. That might have to be enough. Thomas was quiet, then nodded slowly. Your mother used to say that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect romance. It was about showing up, being honest, choosing each other even when it's hard. If Adrian does that for you, if he makes you feel seen and valued and safe, then maybe you've found something real. Even though he's a criminal? Even though he's complicated. We're all complicated, Em. We all have darkness in us. The question is whether we're trying to be better. Thomas smiled sadly. From what I've seen, Adrian is trying. That counts for something. They talked for another hour, about small things and important things, about memories and hopes and the strange paths life took. When the federal agent finally knocked to indicate time was up, Emma felt like she was being torn in half. I love you, Dad, she said, hugging him fiercely. Be safe. Build a good life. Find happiness. I love you too, baby, more than anything. Thomas held her tight. And Emma, don't settle for half measures. If you're going to stay with Adrian, demand everything. Demand honesty, partnership, respect. You deserve nothing less. Emma nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She kissed her father's cheek one last time and then forced herself to walk away, each step feeling like tearing off a piece of her soul. Adrian was waiting in the hallway, and the moment he saw her face, he pulled her into his arms. Emma finally let the tears fall, sobbing into his shoulder while he held her and murmured quiet assurances in a mixture of English and what sounded like Italian. The drive back was quiet, Emma staring out the window while Adrian held her hand. When they reached the penthouse, Emma went straight to her room, needing to process everything alone. But sleep wouldn't come. She lay in bed thinking about goodbyes and new beginnings, and the impossible choice between safety and love. A soft knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. Adrian stood in the hallway, still dressed despite the late hour. Can I come in? He asked. Emma nodded, and he entered, sitting on the edge of her bed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I'm sorry, Adrian said finally. I know saying goodbye to your father was impossibly hard. If there was another way, there wasn't. I know that. Emma sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. He told me not to settle for half measures, that if I'm going to stay with you, I should demand everything. Smart man. Adrian's expression was unreadable. What did you tell him? That I think I'm falling in love with you. The words came out steadier than Emma expected. And that I don't know if you know how to love someone, but you show up for me in ways that matter. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out, taking her hand. I don't know if I know how to love someone either. My father taught me business and violence and how to survive. He didn't teach me tenderness or vulnerability or how to let someone in without seeing them as a liability. But, Emma prompted, hearing the unspoken word, but you make me want to learn. You make me think that maybe there's more to life than empire building and calculated risks. Adrian's thumb traced circles on her palm. I don't have pretty words or romantic gestures. All I can offer is honesty and partnership and the promise that I will always protect what we're building, even if I'm not always good at naming what it is. That's enough, Emma said softly. That's more than enough. He pulled her close, and Emma let herself be held. Let herself believe that maybe love didn't have to be perfect or safe. Maybe it just had to be real. They fell asleep like that, Adrian holding Emma as Chicago's lights glittered beyond the windows, and somewhere out there, Marco Vega prepared for his final desperate move. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting realization that she wasn't in her own bed. Adrian's arm was still wrapped around her waist, his breathing deep and even against her shoulder. For a moment, she let herself simply exist in the peaceful intimacy of the moment, knowing it wouldn't last. It didn't. Adrian's phone buzzed violently on the nightstand, shattering the quiet. He was instantly alert, reaching for it with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis calls. Emma watched his expression shift from soft to sharp as he read whatever message had come through. "What is it?" she asked. "Vega's been arrested. Federal agents picked him up an hour ago at his estate." Adrian sat up, already scrolling through additional messages. "He's being arraigned this afternoon. Catherine says the charges are solid. Human trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy. Your father's testimony is the cornerstone of the case." Emma should have felt relief. Instead, dread pooled in her stomach. "Why do you look worried?" "Because Marco Vega doesn't go down quietly, and he has 12 hours before arraignment to make one last move." Adrian was already standing, pulling on yesterday's clothes. "I need to check security protocols. Stay in the penthouse until I verify everything is secure." He kissed her forehead, a gesture so casual and domestic it made Emma's heart ache, and disappeared into his study. Emma lay in bed for another moment, processing the fact that after 4 months of careful planning and dangerous games, it was finally happening. Vega was arrested. Her father would testify. The nightmare was almost over. Almost. She showered and dressed, choosing comfortable clothes instead of the designer pieces Isabel had filled her closet with. Something about today felt different, like she needed to be ready to move quickly. The feeling intensified when she found Adrian in his study surrounded by security monitors, his expression darker than she'd seen in weeks. "Talk to me," Emma said. 3 of Vega's top lieutenants are unaccounted for. They should have been arrested with him, but they weren't at the estate. Adrian pulled up street camera footage. James is tracking their last known locations, but they've gone dark. "Oh, you think they're planning something?" "I know they are. The question is what and when." He stood, moving to the weapons safe Emma had discovered weeks ago. She watched him check a handgun with practiced ease, then hold out a smaller weapon. "Do you remember what I taught you?" Emma nodded, taking the gun with hands that were steadier than she expected. Adrian had insisted on basic weapons training after Vega's warehouse attack, teaching her to shoot in the penthouse's private range. She'd resisted at first, hating the violence it represented, but now she was grateful. "Safety on until you need it," Adrian reminded her. "And Emma? If something happens, if anyone gets past security, you don't hesitate. You protect yourself first." "What about you?" "I'll be fine. I've been doing this a long time." He cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the tension radiating from him. "But I need to know you can handle yourself if things go wrong." "I can handle myself," Emma said with more confidence than she felt. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Adrian coordinated with his security team while Emma tried to distract herself with anything that didn't involve thinking about Vega's missing lieutenants. She'd just settled in to review museum committee notes when the power went out. The penthouse plunged into darkness for 3 seconds before emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in eerie red. Emma was on her feet immediately, the gun Adrian had given her suddenly heavy in her hand. "Adrian?" she called out. He appeared from his study, weapon drawn, phone pressed to his ear. His expression was grim. Someone cut the main power line. Building security is compromised. James, talk to me. How many? Emma couldn't hear the response, but she saw Adrian's jaw tighten. 6 men in the building, 3 already past ground floor security, he said, ending the call. They're coming here. Emma's heart hammered. What do we do? We get you to the safe room. Adrian moved to a bookshelf, pressing a hidden panel that Emma had never noticed. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a reinforced door. It's bulletproof, has independent power and communications. You lock yourself in and don't come out until I give the all clear. What about you? I'll handle them. Adrian started to guide her toward the safe room, but Emma pulled back. No, you said we're partners. Partners don't hide while the other one fights. She raised the gun, checking the safety exactly as he'd taught her. I'm staying. Emma, this isn't a negotiation. You're right, it's not. Emma's voice was steady despite her fear. I've spent my whole life being protected, being kept safe, being treated like I couldn't handle difficult things. I'm done with that. If they're coming for us, we face them together. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the penthouse. Multiple sets, moving quickly. They were out of time. Fine. But you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Deal? When Emma nodded, Adrian positioned himself near the entrance, using the wall for cover. They'll come through the door fast, expecting to overwhelm us with numbers. Let them get inside before engaging. Emma's mouth was dry, her pulse racing, but her hands remained steady on the weapon. She positioned herself behind Adrian, watching the door with focus that felt surreal. This was happening, really happening. The door exploded inward with a crash that made Emma flinch. 4 men poured through, armed and moving with military precision. Adrian fired twice, dropping the first 2 before they'd fully entered. The 3rd man got a shot off that splintered the wall inches from Emma's head. She didn't think. Training took over. Emma aimed and fired, the recoil shocking through her arms. The man went down clutching his shoulder, his weapon clattering across the floor. The 4th man tackled Adrian before he could fire again, both of them crashing into the coffee table. Emma swung her weapon toward them, but couldn't get a clear shot without risking hitting Adrian. She watched helplessly as they fought, brutal and efficient, until Adrian managed to slam the man's head into the floor hard enough to knock him unconscious. Behind you! Emma screamed. Adrian spun just as 2 more men appeared in the doorway. He fired, taking down one, but the other one's shot caught him in the shoulder. Adrian went down hard, blood blooming across his white shirt. Emma didn't hesitate. She fired 3 times. Her shots wild but effective enough to force the man back into the hallway. Then she was at Adrian's side, her hands already pressing against the wound. How bad? She asked, her voice surprisingly calm. I'll live. Help me up. Adrian's face was pale but determined. There's at least 2 more. We need to move to a defensible position. Emma helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as they moved toward his study. The room had a secondary entrance and better sight lines. Adrian directed her to barricade the main door while he pulled up security feeds on his phone. James has neutralized 3 more in the stairwell, Adrian reported, his breathing labored. But there's still movement on this floor. They're regrouping. Let me see your shoulder. Emma's nursing training kicked in automatically. The wound was bleeding heavily, but the bullet had gone through clean. She grabbed Adrian's shirt and ripped it, using the fabric to create a pressure bandage. You need a hospital. After. Right now I need... Adrian stopped, listening. Footsteps again, but slower this time. Deliberate. A voice called out from the living room, cultured and familiar. Marco Vega. Adrian, I know you can hear me. I also know you're bleeding, outgunned, and running out of time. Vega's voice was almost conversational. The federal charges are impressive, I'll admit. Your wife's father did excellent work documenting my operations. But did you really think I'd let myself be caged without ensuring you suffered first? Emma and Adrian exchanged glances. Vega was supposed to be in federal custody. How was he here? I have excellent lawyers and better connections, Vega continued, as if reading their thoughts. Bond was posted within 2 hours, and I decided to spend my temporary freedom settling old debts. You've cost me billions, Adrian. Destroyed operations I spent decades building. I think that deserves a personal response. Adrian pulled up the security feed, swearing quietly. The video showed Vega standing in the wrecked living room, flanked by 2 heavily armed men. But it also showed something else. James and 3 security personnel approaching from the service entrance. "Keep him talking," Adrian whispered to Emma. Then louder, "Marco, this is between us. Let Emma go. She's not part of this." Vega laughed. "Not part of this? She's the daughter of the man who betrayed me. She married you to provide cover for your little crusade against my empire. She's very much part of this, Adrian. In fact, she's the perfect ending to our story." Emma felt cold fear wash over her, but she forced it down. She could hear Adrian coordinating with James through his earpiece, getting updates on position and timing. They just needed to keep Vega occupied a little longer. "You're going back to prison," Emma called out, surprising herself. "My father's testimony is airtight. The federal prosecutors have everything they need. Killing us doesn't change that." "No, but it sends a message." Vega moved closer to the study, visible now through the doorway. "That Marco Vega doesn't forgive, doesn't forget, and always gets the last word." Adrian tensed beside Emma, and she knew the confrontation was seconds away. But then something unexpected happened. The emergency lights flickered and died completely, plunging the penthouse into total darkness. "Now!" Adrian shouted. Chaos erupted. Emma heard gunfire, shouting, the crash of furniture being overturned. She stayed low like Adrian had taught her, her weapon ready but unable to see targets. Someone grabbed her arm in the darkness, and she almost fired before recognizing Adrian's grip. "This way," he said, pulling her toward the safe room after all. But they only made it 3 steps before the emergency lights flickered back on, revealing Vega directly in their path, his weapon aimed at Emma's chest. "End of the line," Vega said, his finger tightening on the trigger. Adrian moved without hesitation, shoving Emma aside and taking the bullet meant for her. He went down hard, gasping, and Emma screamed. But her scream transformed into action. She raised her weapon and fired, again and again, until Vega stumbled backward and collapsed. The penthouse fell silent, except for Emma's ragged breathing and the distant sound of sirens. James appeared with his team, quickly securing the scene and calling for medical assistance. Emma dropped her weapon and fell to her knees beside Adrian, her hands finding the new wound in his chest. You're okay, she chanted, applying pressure even as blood pooled beneath her fingers. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." Adrian's hand found hers, his grip weak but present. "Vega. Dead," James reported grimly, checking the body. "Emma killed him." Emma barely registered the words. She was focused entirely on Adrian, on keeping him conscious, on willing him to survive. Her nursing training took over completely. Assess the wound, maintain pressure, monitor breathing, keep him talking. "Adrian, look at me," she commanded. "Tell me about your mother. You never talk about her. Tell me now." Adrian's eyes focused on her face with visible effort. She loved music, opera, used to take me to the symphony every month." "What else?" Emma kept him talking while paramedics rushed in, their equipment clattering. "What was her name?" Sofia Castillo. She had your eyes, kind eyes." Adrian coughed, and Emma's heart nearly stopped. "Emma, if I don't—" "You will. You're going to be fine because I'm not done with you yet." Emma moved aside so the paramedics could work, but kept holding his hand. "You promised me honesty and partnership. You don't get to break that promise by dying." A ghost of a smile touched Adrian's lips. "Demanding woman. You have no idea." They loaded Adrian onto a stretcher, Emma climbing into the ambulance without asking permission. The ride to the hospital was a blur of medical jargon and controlled chaos. Emma held Adrian's hand the entire way, talking to him constantly, refusing to let him slip away. The trauma team took over the moment they arrived, wheeling Adrian into surgery while a nurse tried to pull Emma back. She resisted, still in shock, still covered in Adrian's blood. "Ma'am, you need to let them work," the nurse said gently. "I'm his wife," Emma said, and realized it was true. Not the performance they'd maintained for months, but real. "I need to be here when he wakes up." "And you will be. But right now, the best thing you can do is let the surgeons do their job." The nurse guided Emma to a private waiting room. "I'll update you as soon as I know anything." Emma sat in the sterile room, her hands still shaking, and finally let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing. The terror of the attack, the violence she'd committed, the sickening realization that she'd killed a man. the overwhelming fear that she'd lose Adrian just when she'd finally admitted she loved him. Hours passed. Catherine arrived, then Marcus, then what seemed like half of Adrian's organization. They brought her clean clothes, coffee she didn't drink, quiet words of support. Through it all, Emma sat and waited and prayed to whatever higher power might be listening that Adrian would survive. Finally, a surgeon appeared, still in scrubs. Emma stood so quickly she nearly fell. "Mrs. Castillo?" The surgeon's expression was professionally neutral. "Your husband is out of surgery. It was touch and go for a while. The bullet nicked his pulmonary artery, but we were able to repair the damage. He's critical, but stable." Emma's knees went weak with relief. "Can I see him?" "He's in recovery. It'll be a few hours before he's conscious, but you can sit with him." They led Emma to a private room where Adrian lay surrounded by monitors and IV lines, looking smaller and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. She pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand, careful of the various tubes and wires. "You stubborn, self-sacrificing idiot," she whispered, tears finally falling. "Taking a bullet meant for me. That wasn't the deal." She sat with him through the night, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, listening to the reassuring beep of the heart monitor. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications. Dawn was breaking when Adrian's eyes finally opened. "Emma," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "I'm here. I'm right here." She squeezed his hand. "You're going to be okay. The surgery went well." Adrian's eyes focused on her face, taking in the dried blood on her clothes, the exhaustion in her features. "Vega? Dead. I killed him." Emma said it flatly, still processing the reality. "He was going to shoot you again, and I just reacted." "Good." Adrian's grip tightened fractionally. "Your father?" "Safe. Still in witness protection. The federal case is proceeding. Catherine says it's airtight, even without Vega alive to prosecute." Emma managed a watery smile. "We won, Adrian. It's over." "The arrangement," Adrian said, struggling to stay conscious. 6 months is almost up. You're free to go." Emma looked at this man who'd started as her captor and become her partner, who'd protected her father and taught her strength, who'd taken a bullet meant for her without hesitation. The man she'd fallen impossibly, completely in love with. "What if I don't want to go?" she asked softly. "What if I want to take that permanent option you showed me? What if I want to stay, not as an arrangement, but as a real marriage?" Adrian's eyes widened slightly. "Emma, you just killed a man because of my world. You were attacked in your own home. How can you possibly want to stay?" "Because that world also taught me I'm stronger than I knew. Because being with you makes me feel more alive than I ever did before. Because I love you, Adrian Castillo, and I choose you. Fully, freely, knowing exactly what I'm choosing." "You love me," Adrian repeated, like he was testing the words. "Yes. And I think you love me too, even if you don't have the words for it yet." Emma leaned forward, careful not to disturb his injuries. "So when you're recovered, we're going to have a conversation about what our real marriage looks like. About partnership and honesty and building something together. But right now, you need to rest." "Emma," Adrian said again, his eyes drifting closed. "I do. Love you. Not good at saying it, but I do." Emma kissed his forehead gently. "I know. Now sleep. I'll be here when you wake up." She was, and the next day, and the day after that, as Adrian slowly recovered. They talked, really talked, about what they both wanted, what scared them, what a real marriage between them might look like. It wasn't always easy. Adrian struggled with vulnerability, with believing he deserved something good. Emma wrestled with the violence she'd committed and the darkness of the world she was choosing to inhabit. But they worked through it together, learning each other beyond the performance, discovering that the connection they'd built through necessity had become something genuine and worth fighting for. 3 weeks after the attack, Adrian was discharged from the hospital. They returned to the penthouse, which had been fully repaired and secured with even more comprehensive systems. Emma walked through the space that had started as a prison and become a home, marveling at how much had changed. "I have something for you," Adrian said, leading her to his study. He pulled out the amended contract, the one that removed the 6-month limit. "If you still want this, if you're sure." Emma took the document, reading through the terms carefully. Full partnership, equal say in decisions, complete honesty. The option to walk away at any time with full financial support. It was everything she'd demanded and more. "I'm sure," she said, signing her name with steady hands. "Are you?" Adrian took the pen and signed his own name below hers. "I've never been more sure of anything." They had the contract notarized the next day, making their arrangement official. But the real celebration came a week later, when Catherine called with news that Emma's father had successfully entered witness protection and sent word that he was safe and settling into his new life. "He wanted you to know he's proud of you," Catherine relayed, "and that he's glad you found happiness, even in unexpected places." Emma cried when she hung up, grieving the loss even as she celebrated his safety. Adrian held her, understanding without words that she could feel both things simultaneously. Over the following months, they built their life together piece by piece. Emma returned to her passion for helping people, but channeled it through the charitable foundation they established together, a legitimate organization focused on supporting trafficking victims and providing resources for people escaping dangerous situations. It felt right, using the darkness they'd survived to create light for others. Adrian continued transforming his empire, systematically transitioning away from criminal operations toward legitimate businesses. It was slow, dangerous work, but with Emma beside him, he found the courage to keep pushing forward. She became his partner in every sense, offering insight on deals, calling him out when he slipped into old patterns, reminding him why they'd chosen this harder path. 6 months after Vega's death, they held a private ceremony with close friends, renewing the vows they'd first spoken under false pretenses. This time, every word was true. This time, when Adrian promised to honor and protect her, Emma knew he meant it soul deep. And when she promised to stand beside him through whatever came, she felt no fear, only certainty. The night after the ceremony, they stood together at the windows of the penthouse, looking out over Chicago's glittering skyline. Adrian's arms wrapped around Emma from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Everything you gave up to be here?" Emma thought about the question seriously, considering the life she'd left behind, the small apartment, the exhausting shifts, the constant struggle to stay afloat. She thought about what she'd gained: partnership with someone who challenged and supported her, purpose in their foundation work, strength she'd never known she possessed. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret choosing you, choosing us, choosing this life we're building together. Even though it started with a desperate bargain in the snow?" Emma turned in his arms to face him, seeing the vulnerability that still surprised her sometimes, especially because it started that way. "We proved that something born from necessity can transform into something chosen, something real, something that lasts." Adrian kissed her, and Emma kissed him back, thinking about how far they'd traveled from that first morning when she'd climbed into his car with no choice and so much fear. The Mafia boss had never truly let her go, but somewhere along the way she'd stopped wanting to leave, because this was where she belonged, not because she was trapped, but because she'd chosen it, chosen him, chosen them, and that made all the difference. In the years that followed, their foundation grew into one of Chicago's most respected charitable organizations, helping hundreds of people escape trafficking and rebuild their lives. Adrian successfully transitioned most of his operations into legitimate enterprises, using his considerable skills for construction and development rather than crime. There were still dangers, still enemies from his past who tested them occasionally, but they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. Emma never saw her father again, but she received occasional word through federal channels that he was well, that he'd found peace in his new life. It hurt less over time, the grief transforming into gratitude that he was safe and free. The penthouse that had started as a gilded cage became a home filled with laughter and love and the comfortable intimacy of two people who truly knew each other. Emma kept Adrian honest, pulling him back when he slipped into old patterns of control and manipulation. Adrian kept Emma strong, reminding her of the courage she'd discovered in herself that she never wanted to lose. Some people whispered about the nurse who'd married the notorious Adrian Castillo, speculating about arrangements and power dynamics. Let them whisper, Emma thought. They didn't know the truth, that love could grow in unexpected soil, that transformation was always possible, that the strongest bonds were sometimes forged in the darkest circumstances. On their 5th anniversary, Adrian surprised Emma with a gift, official documentation showing that Thomas Lawson had been located and, with federal permission, would be calling that evening. Emma cried when she heard her father's voice for the first time in years, telling him about the foundation, about her life with Adrian, about the happiness she'd found. "I'm proud of you, baby," Thomas said. "You took an impossible situation and turned it into something beautiful. That takes strength most people never find." After the call, Emma found Adrian on their terrace, looking out at the city they'd made their own. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she said, "for the call, for everything. You don't need to thank me for giving you what you deserve." Adrian turned to hold her properly. "You saved me, Emma. From becoming my father, from a life of empty power and hollow victories. You showed me what actually matters." "We saved each other," Emma corrected. "That's what partners do." They stood together as Chicago sparkled below them, two people who'd found each other in the snow and built something that would last a lifetime. The desperate bargain had become a love story. The forced arrangement had become a chosen partnership. And the Mafia boss, who'd never intended to let her go, had instead given her something far more valuable. He'd given her a choice, and Emma, knowing exactly what she was choosing, had chosen him back. Forever.